This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everyone. I make it now 10 o'clock. Just to welcome you all to the meeting of the Licenses Subcommittee on Friday, the 3rd of July. My name is Mark Thomas. I'll be one of the supporting democratic officers for the meeting. We also have my colleague here, Gareth Davis, who will also be supporting. Before we actually start the meeting, I'm just going to go through some admin and other sort of points. Can everyone hear okay? Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Just to remind everyone, this meeting will be recorded for public viewing. This won't include the committee deliberations, which are private, but all the rest of the business of the meeting will be recorded. Could all participants confirm they have received and read the papers, which includes the procedure for the meeting?
Yes.
If we can raise a thumbs up will be fine. Thank you. Thank you very much. Just as a general advice, could all participants mute themselves when not speaking? This is just in order to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking. If a participant wishes to speak, if they've got their webcam on or they put their webcam on, they can put their hand up. If they've got any problems and they're only on audio, you can use the chat option on this application, which is a little bubble on the top. Or obviously, if you've got any difficulties there, just quickly interject and say, "Can I speak after the other person has spoken?" If any participant has difficulty hearing or being heard, then they should let the supporting officer, such as myself or the chairman, know. If they have a webcam, then they should try turning this off in order to help their connection, and it might help them to hear a lot better. If a participant still has difficulty with their connection, please let me know, and what we can do if required, temporarily adjourn the meeting for the person to dial in. You will have had a telephone number with a meeting invite as well, so you can access it through conventional telephone as well. Okay, I think that's the main preamble. What we will do now, if everyone's ready, I will seek to get nominations for the chairman for the licensing subcommittee for today. So I'll ask the members.
I'll nominate Councillor John Thomas.
Okay, if members would like to vote on that, if there's no other nominations, is everyone happy with Councillor John Thomas? Yeah, I think I see, yeah, both hands. Yeah, that's okay. That's unanimous.
Okay,
Chair.
thank you, Mark. Thank you, members, for entrusting me with this first remote meeting. We'll obviously, it is the first one, and we'll try and do our best to make sure it runs as smoothly as possible. As Mark said, if you wish to speak, there is an order which you've all seen in the papers. If you wish to speak, to ask questions or whatever at the appropriate time, please raise your hand to indicate, or if all else fails, get in touch with Mark on the telephone. I'll do my best to keep my eyes on everyone, make sure that everyone gets a chance to speak as and when required. So if we can, we'll start with introductions. I'm Councillor John Thomas, and as you are now aware, I've been elected as chairman of the subcommittee for today. I am actually the chairman of the Statutory Licensing Committee and the Vale of Glamorgan Council. So if the other, Pam?
I'm Councillor Pamela Drake.
And Rachel.
Hello everybody, I'm Councillor Rachel Nugent-Finn.
Okay, so the three of us make up the panel for today, the subcommittee for today, and we will actually be the ones that are making the decision on this application. If I could ask everybody else to introduce themselves, please. So who wants to kick off? Mr. Brown.
Good morning, Chairman and other members. My name is Philip Brown. I am the current chairman of Windsor Court Management Committee.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Hughes, is it Mr. Hughes? Mr. Hughes, we're having difficulty hearing you. Perhaps you could switch your camera off when you're speaking.
I think he's on mute.
Yeah,
I think
okay, he's away
mute.
now. No, he's muted himself again.
Would anybody object if I quickly left the meeting to go and speak to Mr. Hughes? He's just upstairs from me, and I maybe can sort some of these technical difficulties out. Would that be all right?
Yeah, there's no way that you could both be where your connection is there?
I'll ask Mr. Hughes to come down and join me here if you give me just a few minutes. Would that be all right?
It might be easier because I think we're going to struggle the way things are going at the moment. So can we just have just a short adjournment while Mr. Brown goes to get Mr. Hughes?
Thank you very much indeed. I shall be back shortly.
Okay, I'll stop recording while the adjournment goes on.
This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hughes. You able to hear us now?
Yes, technology will always let you down when you want it to.
Yeah. I think we just wanted to check with you that everything's okay as far as your social distancing is concerned.
Yeah, that's a bit of concern because my wife is shielding, so we've had a bit of a performance just to get me down here. But we're here. I'm now with Mr. Brown, and I've left my flat.
Okay, and you're happy with that as far as you're being with Mr. Brown as far as the social distancing is concerned?
Yes, you and I are maintaining social distance. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So would you just like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm David Hughes, and I'm chairman of the Residents Committee of Windsor Court on the Esplanade.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Phipps?
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, all. My name is Matthew Phipps. I'm from TLT Solicitors. I'm here to present the application for premises license this morning. Also, I'm accompanied by Philip Ryan, who you can see. I hope have explained, and I hope has been explained to you, it's proposed that it'll just be me speaking because of the slightly unusual nature of the remote hearing. It doesn't really allow for solicitors and clients to sort of have a conflab sitting at the table while we whisper into each other's ears. So Mr. Ryan's observing today, and we are, just so that everyone knows, we are, if we need to, we are going to communicate by text message. So if you do see us on the phone, we're not doing something else. We are just swapping a message with one another. Hope that's okay.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Phipps. Mr. Ryan, obviously, Mr. Phipps has explained the situation. If at any time you do wish to speak, obviously you can indicate the same as everyone else.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And the officers, Viv, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Viv Simmons, licensing officer.
Okay, and Yvonne?
Good morning, everyone. Yvonne Whitshall, team manager for licensing.
And Richard?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Richard Price. I'm the legal advisor to the subcommittee.
I think we've already heard from Mark. He's already introduced himself, and we also have Gareth this morning. So Gareth?
Morning, everybody. I'm just supporting Mark in case there's any technical issues. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. I think that's checked that everybody is actually able to speak and communicate as well. So item 2 on the agenda is a declaration of interest. Can I just check with my other 2 members of the panel that nobody has any declaration of interest to declare? That's a relief anyway.
Nothing
So,
to declare, John. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Can we go on then to moving on to the actual report, and can I ask Yvonne to run us through the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. As the papers indicate, this is an application for the grant of a premises licence. It's made by Penn Trading Limited, and it's for the Beachcliff Fish and Chips on the Esplanade in Penarth. The application seeks licensable activities of late night refreshment and the sale of alcohol as indicated in the report. I can confirm the application was served on the responsible authorities and there have been no representations made by those parties. The advertising of the application resulted in 5 representations from interested parties, which are outlined in your report at Appendix B. The reason for the hearing is those representations have not been withdrawn, and apart from that, Chair, I don't propose to go into too much detail on the report, other than to say we've had 2 additional bundles for consideration, one submitted by the applicant, which I believe has already been circulated, and a set of photographs submitted by the residents, which again, I understand that Democratic Services have circulated to everyone. So unless there are any technical questions about the application process, I propose I just hand back to the Chair to take the meeting through the next stage.
Okay, thank you, Yvonne. Anyone have any questions at this stage? If not, can I hand over to Mr. Phipps to put the case for the applicant, please? I think you're still muted, Mr. Phipps.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chair. And just to say from the outset, thank you to Mark, who has set up what I understand is your first committee hearing undertaken like this. So we're very grateful to you and to officers for having us in front of you. There are a relatively modest number of papers, and I understand all of those have been circulated. There probably are 3 things for me to particularly refer to. The first is the application, which is Appendix A. The second are the representations lodged by the 5 residents, which I think is Appendix B. And then particularly from my perspective, there was circulated yesterday, as Yvonne has highlighted, a bundle of papers which had effectively 4 photographs or 5 photographs, I think, attached from us, and a couple of sides of A4, the equivalent of a couple of sides of A4, just setting out our case. What I would like to do is really go through that document. You will be aware that in your remote procedure, applicants are effectively invited to submit a written version of their presentation to the subcommittee. So if I may, I'm just going to really sort of primarily focus on that, if it helps committee and the other attendees, as the basis of what I'm going to say this morning. So just if I may, I'll just take you through that document. I'm presuming that everyone's had sight of that and that you've got access to that. Now, I'm not planning on reading it start to finish, but I'd just like to draw your attention to particular points within it, if that's okay. I'm presuming if no one says no, then that must be fine. So let me do that if I may. So the first thing then is the application and what's being sought. So first of all, the application is seeking a permission to permit the sale of alcohol on and off the premises until 11 p.m. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. The second part, if you will, of the application, my splitting it up, by the way, is obviously not quite how the application is drafted, but it just may help proceedings today if I do it in this way. The second part then is that for Thursday, Friday and Saturday, we have requested that the permission for alcohol be extended until 12 midnight. The third element of the application is that on Thursday, Friday and Saturday, we would like to sell hot food and hot drink until 12 midnight, and so that is the late night refreshment element. And then in addition to all of that, we have asked for 30 minutes. I'm going to call it drinking up time, as we all know what that means, but I think technically the legislation calls it wind down period. In our note, which I'll come on to in due course, we recognise that one of the particular concerns of the residents is the off sales of alcohol element after 11 p.m. And as you'll see from the note, we have proposed that the only permission for the sale of alcohol after 11 p.m., if indeed you grant any of it, will be for on sales only, so that one could consume a drink with food in the premises after 11 p.m. on Thursday, Fridays and Saturdays. So that's the one, if you will, finesse to the application following receipt of the representations. Our view and our submission is that this is not a greedy application. It's sensible, measured, proportionate. The application proposes that the designated premises supervisor will be Philip Carl Ryan, who is in front of you. He's an experienced licensee with over 20 years experience working throughout Cardiff and Wales. He is also resident above the premises. The application has within it, as you would expect and as your policy obliges us to consider, a series of conditions that attend to the issues that likely arise for an operation of this sort. The wording obviously is in Appendix A, and the specific wording will be attached to the license if you're minded to grant, but just rattling you through, if I may, a summary of those conditions. Foods to be available throughout, a comprehensive CCTV system, which in passing I should say has already been installed and which covers the outside areas as well as the inside, an incident log, no super strength beers or lagers, no self-service of alcohol, no noise to escape from plant or other equipment, no fumes, steam or odours from other equipment, litter and cleansing procedures, which I'll return to. I know that's an issue for the residents. No collections of waste or recycling after 11 p.m. nor before 8 a.m., which again I'll return to. No, what I'm going to call bottling out, but no putting out of waste after 10:30 p.m. and not before 8 a.m. No deliveries between 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. Waste to be properly presented, regular litter patrols, smoking outside. Forgive me for saying so. Could someone just put themselves on mute? I think there must be someone who isn't on mute. I keep getting a.
I've just muted Mr. Brown's microphone.
Forgive me. Sorry to ask that, but anyway. Then and a challenge 21 proof of age policy for the alcohol element. There is a plan of the premises that accompanies the application, and what members will see is a plan disclosing tables and chairs, as it was obviously intended that the premises would operate with a significant restaurant offer. You will all understand that in the current COVID circumstances that the operation of the premises can't operate in that manner, although obviously after yesterday's announcements that hopefully will develop. This application is not about a fish and chip shop being permitted to operate from this location. With all due respect to the committee, we don't need anybody's permission to do that. The premises has already opened, it already trades, and the hours until 11 p.m. only for sale of hot food and hot drink are effectively granted to everyone by national government. In terms of the conditions, what we say is that the conditions that are proposed with a couple of additional ones that I'll want to turn to in due course, attach to all of the concerns that are raised by residents. In its simplest form, we say that the grant of a license will impose a regulatory burden on the applicant, and that is by way of condition, as well as obviously compliance and enforcement, very much to everyone's advantage. It imposes upon us requirements that attend to many of the concerns that are raised. The premises first applied for a license in January, and then we came to the end of the consultation period at the end of February, and in the ordinary course we would have had a hearing give or take at the end of March. Obviously the COVID interruption has caused significant delay, and we find ourselves effectively conducting that hearing now. But in the run-up to what was the end of March period, we applied for and obtained a number of temporary event notices to allow the premises to trade, I think limited to 11 p.m, to allow the premises to trade with the sale of alcohol. We are unaware of any concerns being articulated about that at all. We have bluntly and effectively undertaken a trial, and we say that in the context of the sale of alcohol till 11, there is nothing, no evidence, no representation, nothing to suggest that we can't do that perfectly properly. The issue of alcohol sales until 11 p.m, whilst no doubt will be said that that it's objected to by residents, when you look at Appendix B and you consider the detail of the representations, there is little, if I might say so, that suggests that the sale of alcohol before 11 is really a point of significant contention. I have read the representations to suggest that it is the period after 11 p.m. on Thursday, Fridays and Saturdays that is the primary focus. And I'm not proposing to say a great deal more about Sunday, Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday. I'd invite you to grant the application for sale of alcohol. Obviously, there's no late night refreshment element there because it's only limited till 11. Dealing with the objections, the objections that I have are redacted objections, and so I don't know who has written each of the representations. So my apologies to the attendees on this hearing. So I'm going to talk to the representations, but I'm afraid I don't know which one is which. But if it helps, I mean that's the order that I have them in. If that helps. Sorry. So the first representation, we believe that the application specifically attends to the concerns that are raised because the conditions impose a criminal sanction on the premises were we not to do what we have set out as being of significance, and particularly the refuse collections not being permitted before 8 a.m. and not being permitted into the late night seems to attend specifically to one of the primary concerns. Midnight isn't, I'm bound to also add, to our mind, an inappropriate time, particularly when one considers that other premises in the vicinity along the Esplanade have 1 a.m. and even 2 a.m. permission. Sorry about this. And 2 a.m. permissions. One of the residents suggests that all other premises only trade until 11 o'clock. That, I'm afraid, respectfully, is incorrect. Objection number 2, which is the handwritten one. I don't read that representation as objecting to anything up to 11 p.m. It seems to particularly concentrate on the issue of Saturday. Objection 3, which is this one. The substance of that objection seems to be the late night off license element. And as I hope I've set out fairly, we've reflected on the point that's made in that representation, and we respect the fact there's a fair point made there that the off license after 11 p.m. element could, we don't accept that it would, but it could be said to be a point of legitimate concern, and so we're not proposing to proceed with that element today, which again, I'm bound to say, I hope is fairly reflective of the reasonable approach that my client has adopted here. Objection 4, which is the short one here, says on its 3rd paragraph, there are several dining establishments in the area, none of whom have a late night license. That is incorrect. Obviously, you have licensing officers on this course. You don't need to take that from me, but there are premises in the immediate vicinity, a number of premises in the immediate vicinity, some of whom have a permission that extends to 2 a.m. for people to occupy the premises, 1 a.m. for alcohol, I think in another case, 2 a.m. for alcohol. So it just isn't right. And the representation needs to be read in that context, please. And then the final representation, which is the slightly longer one, there is some initial commentary about the necessity for further business in the location. Your legal advisor will direct you on this, but need isn't an issue in licensing. It's of no consideration. We are here to consider the 4 licensing objectives. Although I'm bound to make the point that in what can only fairly be said to be times of extraordinary economic uncertainty, a business that has opened and sought to provide a high quality operation that has thrived in difficult circumstances, I would invite you to the conclusion that that should be welcomed, albeit I accept that's not a point for the licensing determination. The representation goes on to say that premises appear to operate perfectly successfully, I think, in immediate vicinity of the premises, and we're delighted to see that. That's the point, actually, ultimately, about this case. Licensed premises that are well managed and well controlled can operate perfectly properly, and we say that we're one of those. We say that Mr. Ryan is one of those designated premises supervisors. We say that you can look at our operation and draw that fair conclusion. But actually, of course, I would say that, wouldn't I? But you don't have to rely on my saying that, because as Yvonne has explained, none of the responsible authorities have submitted a representation to this application. We say that is a particularly significant point in favour of this application. You and your legal advisors will be aware that the national guidance makes very plain that, and to quote it, I'm afraid, sorry to quote it, but I must, the police should usually be the licensing authority's main source of advice on matters relating to the promotion of the crime and disorder licensing objectives. And it goes on talking about other responsible authorities, likewise reasonable to expect the licensing authority exercising environmental health functions to make representations where there are concerns about noise nuisance. Neither the Environmental Health Service nor the South Wales Police have seen fit to serve a representation in this case. And please bear in mind that that is not following just the submission of this application, but that is following the conduct of the activities under the temporary event notice and the conduct of the operation more generally through the course of the period of consultation. The licensing policy, I'll just touch on that. You obviously have that in front of you. I mean, the only quick point to make on the licensing policy is that the policy invites applicants to set out in its application and in its conditions the points of particular materiality to the application. And we respectfully suggest that we've done that throughout with a comprehensive operating schedule. And that attends to most, if not all, of the issues. That then, I think, leaves one issue of particular significance that is developed in the photographs that have been produced by the residents, and it's touched on in the photographs that we have produced. I'm not going to take you all through the photographs, but I'm presuming for the moment that you have those. So a number of the photographs disclose that there is waste that is around and about the esplanade, particularly around and about the litter bins along the esplanade, particularly left on top of or to the side of the litter bins, which seem at points to be overflowing. We entirely accept that those photographs show that. There is no challenge to that. That's right. But what our photographs also show is of our staff members walking around the esplanade collecting litter. Not just collecting our litter, collecting litter and waste with black bags, doing it in a COVIDly safe manner with pickup sticks or whatever the right phrase is. And you can see that in our photographs. We're not in any position to challenge the fact that people have left waste next to the bins. We can't challenge the fact that some of the bins have been full. We're not making criticism of anybody for the fact that the bins are full along the esplanade. We are living in, frankly, extraordinary times. The esplanade has certainly been busy for the last few months. As you'd expect, we're in a 5-mile lockdown where travel is discouraged, notwithstanding Ryanair's attempt to fly in and out of Cardiff Airport later today, as I heard on the radio this morning. But that we have been clearing the area as best we've been able gives you, we would respectfully suggest, a window into the soul of the sort of applicant that you're dealing with here. We have a waste collection system. One of the photographs you'll see is of the waste collection process, and you'll see that where we store our large blue waste bins, none of the photographs disclose our commercial waste, if I can call it that, at any point being inappropriately presented for collection. And then the final point, which will have caught everybody's attention, I'm sure, is one of the photos is a photo of a rat. I'm sorry to not put great weight to that photograph, but I don't have any idea where that photo was taken, when it was taken, who took it, where the waste emanated from, whether the box in front of the rat was anything to do with our premises or not. That there are rats, I think I read somewhere, although it's not a legal submission, that there's always a rat within 20 foot of you or something like that. That there may have been a rat in and or around the esplanade in the last 3 months, I'm bound to accept. What I don't accept is that that's got anything to do with a premises license application that's before you today. If the committee are concerned that waste and or litter needs to be attended to, then we entirely accept that point. That's why we've put conditions into our license. If the committee's view is that those conditions don't go far enough, then, without wanting to sound defensive, wouldn't necessarily accept that, then we are of course open to having conditions that oblige us to do everything that we possibly can so as to ensure that waste does not cause a nuisance. And that of course is what we're talking about. What we're talking about is public nuisance, because that's the licensing objective that is raised. So we don't have any issue at all with making sure that we put our shoulder to the wheel and we do everything that we can. It struck me this morning, and I raised this really as a sort of discussion point, perhaps more than as a formal submission. If the view is that we need to provide to the licensing authority a litter management plan, setting out all of the steps of litter and waste management that we have, to effectively articulate it in a series of bullet points, we wouldn't have any objection to that. And if the committee took the view that that should be a condition, we wouldn't have any objection to that. And then the final point really is that I noted that the 2 residents attending today referenced themselves as the chair, I think, and secretary of the Residents Association. Obviously, that doesn't feature as any part of their representations. The representations have been submitted in an individual capacity. But if the view is that it would be helpful to have a better dialogue with residents, we wouldn't have any objection to that. And it would be perfectly open to the committee to have a condition on the license that we are to host, or to at least to call, can't make people attend, but to call a resident meeting on a 6-monthly basis in order that we could discuss matters with our residents. We We recognise we've got residents in close vicinity. A number of them are our customers, and a number obviously today have expressed concern about the premises. We want to have an open and transparent engagement with them. If the committee felt that was a good idea, we certainly would be open to that. But to cut to the chase, and thank you for extending me the time, this is a good application. This is not an unreasonable application. And as I say, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, there's really nothing to add. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, with the concession that the off sales element shouldn't extend beyond 11 p.m. We believe this is a perfectly fair and proper application. And if you look at the conditions, the right balance is struck between what we're asking for, which in the context of the Esplanade is by no means the latest premises within 100 yards, and it's a fair proposal all round. As I say, I'm not planning on taking you through the individual photographs, but I'll leave the committee to look at those at their leisure when you come to retire in due course. But I hope that the photographs fairly represent what's been said. I hope. Well, nothing more to add, Chair. I hope that's about right. Obviously, happy to field any questions you or the committee may have.
Thank you, Mr. Phipps. And it's a chance if either of the Mr. Brown or Mr. Hughes would like to ask any questions. If there are no questions, I will then invite you to address the committee. So do you have any questions, Mr. Hughes?
Sorry, Chair, can I just interject for a second? Sorry.
Yep.
I just want to check. Has everyone had the written representation through from Mr. Phipps? They should have been with the photos.
I don't appear to see anything. Only the photographs are on my email.
But it should have come through for the photos. I'm not sure what's happened there. Do we want to adjourn for a short time, Chair, just to see everyone have a chance to look through Mr. Phipps, what he's already said about, but see the written representation? I'll resend to everyone.
If I could interject on that point. Provided those written representations are sent through, we're happy to consider those when we adjourn to consider the application. Unless there's something Mr. Phipps wants to add and has any objection, I suggest we continue.
Mr. Phipps?
Forgive me, I've just inadvertently turned off my camera. Sorry, I don't quite know what I've done. Yes. Sorry, I just realised, sorry, at the start of the proceedings, obviously I asked about the representation. Does that mean that no one has seen my written document or seen the photographs or any of the material that we provided yesterday following receipt of the material from the residents?
The photos have been seen, Mr. Phipps, but I don't believe the written representation has gone through, unfortunately. I do apologise. I had problems yesterday with Outlook and other issues.
Right. Look, I'm happy to take a steer. The only problem, if I might say, with Mr. Price's observation, and forgive me for saying problem, Mr. Price, it's not really what I mean, but the only problem with the observation of Mr. Price is that we have the hearing, all the questions come out, and then the committee retire and look at my document. It doesn't really get aired. It's just, part of the document and material that's in the reflections of the committee when they come to retire. The reason I appreciate me. Believe me on this, but the reason I cantered through what we would have had to say was I'd rather taken it from the introduction that everybody'd seen it. That's why I just picked out what I hope were the key bullets. I don't want to unnecessarily delay proceedings, but I think, to be fair to Mr. Ryan, I would quite like the committee just to have, even if they just had 5 minutes, just to have a quick look through the representation, because if there was a point that somebody wanted to challenge or somebody wasn't happy or perhaps attended to a question that they might otherwise have, it's probably worthwhile.
I take on board what you're saying, and yeah, I think in the circumstances, I'm happy for that to be distributed now, and we can consider the same. I don't know what you want to do in terms of whether or not we all remain online. We confirm that we have the document via email and that we've read it, and then we recommence the proceedings.
I mean, obviously it's a matter much more for you than for me, but and it's not for me to condescend you by telling you how to conduct your proceedings, but instinctively it feels that just a 5-minute adjournment, say that the committee, aren't on camera and feeling sort of under scrutiny while they have a look at it, and indeed they may want to speak to one another about it if there's a protocol for that. I don't know, but I'd be very happy to just stop for 5 minutes if you wanted to. I don't want anyone feeling, they need to be observed all the time.
Can I just ask, have Mr. Brown and Mr. Hughes seen this document?
I think it's probably best to send it through to everyone now, Chair, just to make sure that everyone's had an opportunity to have a look.
Okay, how do we go about adjourning for 10 minutes then? Do we just mute ourselves and turn our cameras off, or?
Yeah,
that's all I was proposing. That's what I was planning on doing. I mean, you'll forgive me for saying so. I'm going to take a comfort break if you do take 5 minutes. I'll take advantage of the.
It's 10 to now. If Mark can send it through straight away, can we just have 10 minutes? We'll recommence at 11 o'clock. But rather than suspend all the screens and everything, we can just turn ourselves off and turn ourselves back on again. Is everyone happy with that?
Very good. Sorry to cause this delay.
No, it's only right that we see what's being presented. So I think the problem is we wouldn't know what we hadn't seen because we hadn't seen it. So it made it relevant. I was starting to scratch my head a little bit at one time, but we'll certainly have a look at it now. We'll have 10 minutes to have a look at it now if Mark can send it through straight away.
My apologies. Okay. I'll send this through to everyone now. I'll stop recording for the moment.
Okay. Thank you.
So, John,
this conference will now be recorded.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Mark. So it now, as I had indicated, is a chance for the other persons, Mr. Brown, Mr. Hughes, if you have any questions for Mr. Phipps. If you don't have any questions, we can move on to you making your representation. So are there any questions, Mr. Hughes?
No, we'll make a representation if that's all right.
Okay, yeah, and Mr. Brown hasn't got any questions either then?
Sorry.
I apologise. Would it be possible for me just to ask a few questions? Would that be all right?
If you have some questions, yeah, now's the time.
Yeah, thank you. Can I?
Hang on,
yeah.
So might I just ask, just before Mr. Brown asks the questions, if you could just identify which is his representation, just so I've got it in front of me.
Who was it? Was that Pat? Who was I representing? Pat, wasn't it?
I was representing. It was Liz, I believe.
Was it? Well, yeah, you would have. Pat. I believe my representative was Pat Dorrell.
Do we know which? The problem is the letters are redacted.
Oh right, sorry.
Richard,
Pat Dorrell is actually the last representation in the packet. Actually, this document.
So, sorry, forgive me. What, Mr. Brown didn't write this representation?
No, I didn't.
Right. So I mean, look, forgive me for this, but I don't understand that point. Obviously, the people making.
Yeah, only people who make representations can take part in a hearing.
Well, technically correct, because you can nominate somebody to speak on your behalf, and that's what, in essence, I understand that the speaker today is doing. He's.
Forgive me. Sorry. You've got a letter or whatever, an email from the person who made the representation indicating Mr. Brown's to speak on her behalf, have you?
That's my understanding, that this person's authorised to speak on behalf of the person who made the representation.
Can any of the licensing officers confirm this?
Yes, Chair. When we sent the notices of hearing, we asked whether the persons making representations wished to elect a spokesperson, and those were the replies that we had back.
Lovely. Thanks very much.
Okay, you happy to for Mr. Brown to continue, Mr. Phipps?
So yes, absolutely. The only point, slightly technical, and I'm sorry for this, but obviously as Mr. Brown is speaking to this representation, then it's this representation that needs to be spoken to, not just issues above.
Yeah,
I'm sure Mr. Price is, you know, on that point. I can see him nodding, so I'm presuming he's on that. Thank you.
I'm sorry to I'm sorry to be difficult. I was hoping to speak on behalf of some of the representations that Mr. Price mentioned in his last statement. Is that possible, or is that am I not allowed to do that?
At the present time, it's questions for Mr. Phipps on what he has presented to us so far, and then you will be able to make your representation. Your representation should deal with the written representation which has come in, which, as you say, is Mr. and Mrs. Dorrell's representation. If you're speaking on their behalf.
All right. In that case, if you don't mind, I apologise for wasting your time, but I'll withdraw me saying anything now, and we'll move straight to David to make a representation for him, if that's all right. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Brown. So, Mr. Hughes, if you would like to take the chair again.
Thank you, Chair. I have before me the expanded reactions of Pat Dorrell following the letters he received, and do I have your permission to read those?
The position with regards to additional evidence is a matter for the chair. What you're able to do and what has been indicated to you prior to this hearing is you're able to expand upon the written representations of the individual who you're speaking on behalf of. So I can't see by reading any additional documents that would be an expansion of the document that you can speak to. So I would welcome any views from Mr. Phipps on that point.
Sorry, I inadvertently turned my camera. Well, 2 points. Helpful if Mr. Hughes could just explain which of the representations he's speaking to. But secondly, I don't want to be too precious about this. You know, this is fairly difficult, frankly, when we do it face to face. It's not made any easier by the fact that we're doing it remotely. So I don't want to restrict Mr. Hughes, as long as it's developing points that are in the representation that he's representing. You know, I'm not wanting to restrict him. I would like to know which representation that is, though. That's the point for me that's important, is to understand who's speaking to what.
My problem is, you know, I've just listened to a very professional solicitor's report at this meeting. We're talking here people who are just residents in an apartment block. We're not solicitors. We're not professionals in that sense. Therefore, what I have are the emotional reactions of people who've been quite upset over the last couple of months. So what I have before me is what they've written and how they feel. Now, how the committee, whether the committee are prepared to hear that, I think they should, and then they can react accordingly. But of course, it's there are 3 people who've expanded their views to me, and I have 3 statements. I can't guarantee which one is which, other than there are 3 of the 5 people who actually written already. So what I have before me is their expanded views, and it's their views, not mine, of what has already been submitted.
Can I just stop you for a moment, Mr. Hughes? Yvonne indicated she wished to come in.
Yes, Chair. May I read out the order in which those written representations are made? If I could read the names of that to the meeting, I think that might help. I do apologise.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me, everyone?
Yeah. Well, I can.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
The first representation, starting in Appendix B, is Mrs. Gwen Thomas. The next one, the handwritten representation, is Elizabeth Stokes. The third representation is from Christopher Wyatt and Sheila Wyatt. The next one is from Ms. Anne Evans. And the final one is from Pat and Martin Dorrell.
And it's the expanded views of Pat Dorrell, Chris Wyatt, and Liz. I've forgotten her surname. It is. I've had their expanded comments on the original. So if you're happy for me to read those, obviously they're quite emotional. I apologise if some of the language is such, but their feelings are obviously strong. So may I proceed and read those?
Chair, I'm content for those views to be read out. Obviously, Mr. Phipps is in a position to respond to any of those issues, and I'm in a position to advise us to their relevance once we've heard them. And of course, if there are any issues which are irrelevant, those won't be taken into consideration in terms of the legal advice that I will provide.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Richard. The first one, which I've called Resident C for matter of phrase, and I'll read as follows. Objections to the application by Beachcliff Restaurant and Takeaway to sell alcohol. We refer to the objectives of licensing, and in particular to the following three: 1, the prevention of crime and disorder; 2, the prevention of public nuisance; and 3, the protection of children from harm. There are concerns outlined below which touch on all three of these objectives, which taken together will hopefully lead to the amendment of this application. The application is for the restaurant and takeaway to operate 7 days a week from 10 a.m. to 11:30, Monday to Wednesday, 10 a.m. to 12:30 at night, Thursday to Sunday, with a half an hour's drinking up time. This is a change from the original application, which we wrote about originally, a half hour having been added onto each day, also a drinking up time. In the context, the Beachcliff is in a conservation area and of a particular character. The Vale's Unitary Development Plan states the value of the area and its desire to maintain it for the residents of Penarth and the Vale. The Esplanade is a relatively small area with a residential area, seaside pier and promenade, which attract many day visitors. The area is in fact largely residential, with 3 blocks of flats on the Esplanade having over 130 units. So in fact, a few hundred residents live very closely. There are 5 apartments on the 2nd and 3rd floor of Beachcliff building itself. And recently opened Pickford's has rooms above it. The Old Bars itself has 4 residences, and there are 2 other blocks of flats within 50 metres of the Esplanade. The takeaway and the long hours of trading will have a significant impact on the day-to-day living conditions of the residents of the Esplanade and for visitors to this Vale attraction. Barrels have already been placed at the premises to create outdoor eating, drinking areas. Takeaway items are served from the completely open frontage, which resembles a bar. The barrels look like a beer cellar. They block the pavement and 4 to 5 parking spaces. There's no planning permission for these. The outdoor area marked out with barrels would accommodate smokers at all times, whose conversations will carry at night. To add to this, the disposal of the rubbish generated by the takeaway takes place at 7:15 to 7:30 every day, so potentially residents can be kept awake until after midnight or 1 a.m., then woken up just after 7 a.m. No fish and chip takeaway in the town has a license to serve alcohol. The Pen Trading Company, based in London, disregards or is unaware of the size of the residential aspect of the Esplanade area. In addition, Beachcliff is in the Penarth Conservation Area and is subject to conditions that do not allow trading as a takeaway. To date, they are trading without planning permission for a takeaway food outlet. The takeaway started before lockdown, which has of course allowed it to trade in these exceptional circumstances. They are the subject of ongoing complaints for odor nuisance. They've erected illegal illuminated signage. They've blocked a large area of the highway and the pavement without permission. In short, they do not portray themselves as a responsible company suitable to run takeaway licensed premises and the challenges that come with it and the long trading hours. That's one of the residents. If I move the second, there's obviously some.
Can I just stop you there?
Yep.
I can see Mr. Phipps is indicating that he'd like to ask some questions. So if we could take each representation one by one. Could I also ask you if you could just take it a little bit slower, because I'm trying to make notes of what you're actually putting forward. So if we could just go a little bit slower for my benefit, I'd be grateful.
Mr. Phipps?
So forgive me, it's not a question, but it's a point for your legal officer, and the point about just making the notes I get, and it's fairly made. But and I'm sorry to be so solicitory about this, if you forgive the language. You know, licensing solicitors do well to remind themselves they're not in court, and I know I'm not. But you can only develop the points that are within your written representations. That written statement barely touched on the points that are in the written representation that we identify now as number 3 from Mr. and Mrs. Wyatt. I mean, if I take as a tiny example, there was reference to conservation, there's reference to planning. And I appreciate Mr. Price very fairly said that he will in due course be advising you on the legitimacy of the additional material and its relevance. But and I'm not wanting to curtail what the residents say. It's absolutely right that they're, you know, given every opportunity to develop the points they fairly make. But there is a tipping point where, when the additional material doesn't really have anything to do with what the primary objection is, that an applicant can feel a bit blindsided. I mean, I know that, you know, we're wanting to be, and as an applicant, we're wanting to be a little bit generous here and not too precise, but with all due respect, can the next statement please focus on the points that are made in the written representation, not every last criticism and complaint about the way in which the Esplanade operates more generally.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Mr. Phipps. Mr. Hughes, do you understand what Mr. Phipps has said there?
I understand what Mr. Phipps is saying. I apologise. I am only reading what the residents have presented to me. So I accept the fact if there are items in there which are not relevant to licensing, I accept that point certainly.
Yeah,
Shall I continue the second one? And
if the residents wanted to make those points, they should have made them in their original submission, so that Mr. Phipps would have been able to answer them anyways. It's unfair to bring in new points at this stage. So if when you go through, if you're going through another one, when you go through that, you could bear that in mind, we would be grateful. Thank you.
I will try to cut out. I'll go to the second one, which is merely to do with licensing. And this resident says 11 o'clock until midnight with a 30-minute drinking up time is too late to be serving alcohol. This is a residential seafront with approximately up to 170 apartments, a few feet away from the premises, with a large proportion of elderly residents. The noise generated from people leaving, raised voices, banter, laughter, and cars revving up, etc., at midnight and 1 a.m. will be intolerable to residents and impact on their living standards of the as town council paying residents. Again, they refer to the fact, and this is a major complaint, you may argue it's nothing to do with licensing, the fact that it operates with the entire frontage open at those sort of hours, at any sort of hours, and consistently. I apologize, this is a planning issue, but everybody's felt they should be closed. Odor, again, if that you regard as a planning issue, I won't repeat it, but there has been a considerable problem with that, and it still exists. And what does worry me that it seems to be the applicant responds to a problem raised rather than being ahead of it, but that's a different issue. So I do challenge the this resident says in regard of collection of waste, and again a point was made about the hours, and in this resident says in recent years local residents have been subject to bottle collectors early as 5:30 in the morning. This is unacceptable, and I believe that that is a recurring problem. The next point this resident makes, I'm obviously pressing now to try and avoid areas outside licensing, but they complain about the the outside barrels, etc. They do refer to the fact of the increase of antisocial behaviour, and again they believe that operating late at night would do nothing to improve that. So I precede that one. I'll move to the third and final one. And I'm reading, I'm sorry there's a delay because I'm looking at the parts which appear to be relevant. They do make a point about CCTV. It doesn't prevent crime, it merely records it. And somebody has noted that in fact the cameras as they are seem to point into the restaurant and don't seem to display what's going on outside. But again, you might regard that as outside a licensing issue. And I'm reading I'll read this last paragraph, whether you regard it as relevant. Prevention of public nuisance. This is a key point of the objection. The current owners have shown by example that they cannot be trusted to abide by any council regulation, including licensing requirements. You can see there's a very strong feeling by the residents about the problems they've been incurring. So I think to continue that, I will only enlarging on an emotion and feeling which exists by many of the residents in the area. And basically it is, everybody would like to see a restaurant operating well. We've got no complaint with that, operating up to 11 o'clock, serving alcohol, no problem. It's this area of continuing on after that time and selling alcohol, allowing alcohol to be sold outside the building, because even if you argue that, who on earth in Penarth in an fish and chip shop sells alcohol? And again, my last point, I checked. I know that in the report, Mr. Phipps mentioned that somebody is open until 2 o'clock in the morning. I think possibly this could be the pier who have the occasional late light license for weddings and special occasions, but it's not a common occurrence. It's obviously applied for at the time, I believe, but I don't know. But we looked at the opening hours of the other fish and chip shops in Penarth. They all close by 10:30 at night. Cornersville Road closed at 10 o'clock. The restaurants along here close at 9:30 and 10 o'clock. Pickford's the same, closing by 11 o'clock. Coffee Company, they're all closing no later, any of them, than 11 o'clock or 10:30. So to operate until midnight with a drinking time until whatever you call it, 12 in the morning, to us is totally unacceptable. I'll leave it there, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hughes, for your representations. Mr. Phipps, have you any questions for Mr. Hughes at this stage?
Thank you, sir. So I've two questions, please, although one of them may in fact be more of a question for Miss Witchell, and you may say it's not the appropriate time to raise it, but the only question for Mr. Hughes was that in the last development of the representation, one of the points made was a breach of license. Just a simple question, really. Do you accept we don't have a license at the moment, so we can't be in breach of licensing because the license doesn't exist? That's.
I say I'm reiterating what that resident has felt, that you were. I take your point. If there is no license, you can't be in breach of it. Accept that.
No, well, that's grateful. And then the second point, which rather than a sort of through you, Chair, but rather than a sort of tit for tat with me and Mr. Hughes, it may be helpful if you hear from Miss Witchell just as to the hours of operation for the various premises along the Esplanade that Mr. Hughes has made the point about the pier having an occasional wedding permission. That isn't the information that I have, but rather than me saying, oh, the hours are X, Y, and Z, when you might, as I'm the applicant solicitor, you might be better to hear from someone who is objective, and that would be Miss Witchell. But if you choose not to, it's a matter for you. It's not a matter for me.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Phipps. Yvonne, can you give us any further information on this?
Yes, Chair, if I could just read out some of the times for licensable activities for premises along the Esplanade. I would stress that obviously whilst these hours may have been granted, it's up to the individual premises whether they operate to those hours. So Penarth, and I stress some of these are the latest times they can open. It's not throughout the week. So there's a club premises which has a 2 a.m. For the sale supply of alcohol on a Friday and Saturday. There's a restaurant premises licensed till 1 a.m. for the sale supply of alcohol. The Pier Hotel or Pickford's till 11 p.m. Penarth Pier 11:30, and another restaurant with midnight. So that's the sale supply of alcohol. Some of them have half an hour what's called drinking up time. And that's the sort of level of hours that the license is granted to.
Okay, thank you, Yvonne. Mr. Phipps, you happy with that? I see Mr. Hughes is indicating he wishes to speak, but I'll go to Mr. Phipps first, if I may.
So yes, that's really helpful just to resolve that. Really grateful. Thanks.
Okay. Mr. Hughes? Mr. Hughes, you're muted at the moment. Can you unmute your microphone, please? Right, okay.
Hear me now? Yeah, I just want to make the point. Restaurants is one thing. If it is run as a restaurant, fine. But what we're finding is a fish and chip shop where somebody goes in at 11:30 at night, buys fish and chips and alcohol, comes out and then sits on the front of Esplanade at midnight eating them is just unacceptable. If it was a straightforward restaurant, as you say, you mentioned restaurants which do have licenses which they occasionally use, that's fine. But what we're concerned about is this. I mean, name me a fish and chip shop in Penarth that has that sort of activity, selling alcohol and allowing people to eat it outside their premises.
Yeah, in fairness, Mr. Hughes, I don't think you can't compare it to other shops and other. This is the application that's before us, and this is the application we have to consider. So, but take on board the point that you made. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any questions from the members of the panel for? Sorry,
could you bear with me? I think we have a couple of questions. Could you bear with me? We've got to separate, unfortunately. So
sorry, no.
Just mention the rest.
Mr. Hughes, there is no opportunity for you to ask questions at the moment. You've just made your representations. It's for other people to ask you questions.
Okay. All right.
Is there anyone who wants to ask any questions of Mr. Hughes or Mr. Brown? If not, Mr. Hughes, it's your chance now to sum up your objections, and then we will come to Mr. Phipps to have the final summing up on behalf of the applicant. So,
sorry, Chair, I think Councillor Newton wants to make a comment.
Rachel's got wants to speak.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see it. Rachel. Rachel.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've got two questions, please, to Mr. Hughes. Mr. Hughes, I just want to get some clarification. Did you say that you don't have an issue with alcohol being sold up until 11 p.m? Your issue is about the extended half an hour for drinking up time. Is that correct, or did I hear that wrong?
No, operating as a restaurant serving alcohol, we have no objections with that. What we object to is the ability to buy alcohol, take it outside after 11 o'clock and continue to cause a nuisance.
Okay, thank you very much. Second and last question. What do your local elected members, what's their position with this, Mr. Hughes?
I don't think we've had much support, to be honest. Could I just ask Mr. Philip? He may have more information on that. Could you just bear with me a second? Philip?
Certainly.
Philip? Yeah. So we have to maintain social distance, so it's a bit difficult. Bear with us.
Sorry, yes.
have our local councillors have a question to us?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Could you ask that question again?
I apologise. Sorry.
No problem,
Rachel,
Mr.
would you like
Brown.
to ask?
Certainly. Mr. Brown, I would like to understand your local elected member's position with regards to this proposed application.
What was the local representation? We sent out multiple emails to people for basically as many people as we could find. Majority of people were indicating that this was not an issue for them. A number of people didn't respond. I think one member said that she might think about supporting us, but the majority of people were, shall we say, nonplussed with our representation.
Okay, but specifically your elected members, your councillors for your ward.
What did they say?
I've had no reaction from them.
Okay, thank you very much, both. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.
Okay, no further questions. Pam, nothing, no questions? No. Okay, then it's time for the summing up now. So it's Mr. Hughes, it's for you and Mr. Brown to sum up your points. If there's, you cannot bring anything new in at this stage. You can only just sum up what has already been said, and then we'll come to Mr. Phipps to sum up for the applicant. So Mr. Hughes.
Well, to sum up, we are objecting to the late operation of the takeaway restaurant beyond 11 o'clock. Prior to that, we do not. We also feel the statement regarding opening hours, these late hours are seasonal and are not occurring other than, as I just said, seasonally. And it's one can't use that as I say, well, if they have a late license, well, we should have one to operate all year if we so choose.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hughes. Has Mr. Brown got anything to add, or is he happy with what you have said?
Hang on, because
no, I'm happy with that. Thank you.
Nothing to add.
Mr. Phipps, then it's over to you to sum up on behalf of the applicant.
So thank you very much. Thanks for all your time this morning. So a couple of quick points. I often threaten to be quick, and it doesn't quite seem to be that way, but I will do my best with that now. So I'll just take the point from Mr. Brown and from Mr. Hughes that they made right at the end there in response to your colleagues' questions, and to touch on things that they said on which I rely to support my proposition that the application could and should be granted. So first of all, there are 170 residents in the block in question, and 5 of them have written in. Mr. Brown and Mr. Hughes sent out multiple emails, as I understand it, and got little or no support for their proposition. Indeed, Mr. Brown was transparent enough to say that most people were nonplussed with their representation. And as Councillor Nugent-Finn developed, the representatives from wards were not engaged in any way with the proposal. And look, maybe I'm stretching here, but perhaps because the mood around this application isn't quite as negative as has been perhaps first suggested. The point about other premises, which Mr. Price will no doubt advise you on, is of course they are broadly irrelevant, which you've touched on yourself, Chair, because it's each application on its individual merits, and we're only concerned with this application. The reason that I raised it for, and wanted specifically your licensing officer to raise it, is with all due respect to the representations and what was said in developing the points today, that I was concerned that there was a misleading suggestion, and it would have been misleading, that no premises in and or around the Esplanade have hours as extensive as this proposal, because that would be a point. It might cause you concern about antisocial behaviour and so on. That's just wrong. There are premises with 12, 11, with 12, 1 and 2 o'clock. It doesn't make my application any better, but it certainly doesn't make my application any worse. And that's really the only reason I raised that point. There were a couple of other things just raised in in the oral submissions about whether there'd been a change in the application, whether the hours had changed. Again, Mr. Price will confirm that just isn't right with respect. The application is the application. That's Appendix A. That's what was submitted at the outset in January. That's what's being considered today. And then the final point, I think, is probably the critical point. It would appear that there's no actual objection to the 11 o'clock permission, which I hope is in line with the submissions I made for Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday for the sale of alcohol till 11. That seems in order. But the issue that Mr. Hughes particularly developed was his concern about people coming along after 11 o'clock, buying fish and chips, having a drink with alcohol rather than a soft drink, and eating and drinking that on the esplanade, on the benches and so forth, and potentially causing nuisance. And we all heard that. That was really the nugget that goes to the core of the objection. We have already, from the outset, in our written submissions yesterday, in the presentation today, explained that we are content to drop the off sales part from 11 p.m. We would like customers, and no one seems to object to the restaurant part, we would like customers being allowed to consume alcohol inside the premises after 11 o'clock. And if we weren't in the COVID world in which we're in, the plan discloses lots of tables and chairs, and the restaurant part doesn't, again, seem to be objectionable from the resident perspective. So on sales of alcohol after 11 o'clock doesn't seem to be the objection. Off sales, i.e. alcohol for consumption off the premises, seems to be the objection. And we've offered to concede that because we read the representations, we tried to reflect on what was fair and balanced, and we've offered to drop that in its entirety. That then really only leaves one contentious element. Are you minded to allow the premises to trade at all after 11 p.m. for late night refreshment? And we would invite you to do that. We, I'm afraid, wouldn't accept that there's a fair case made out against the premises operating in that way. I concede the alcohol leaving the business, but actually the alcohol within the premises and the food within and without the premises, wrapped and taken away, we don't accept that there's a fair point to be made here, and the business shouldn't be restricted unfairly. I know there were lots of other issues, but and I'll finish on this point, our firm contention is that in extremely difficult circumstances, having opened this business literally a week before lockdown, we've done extremely well. Flawless? No, nobody's done any of this stuff flawlessly, but we have done our best. And if you have a look at the photos, there's a tiny microcosm of this applicant in front of you, sending his staff out to walk up and down the esplanade in order to fill bags with rubbish, not just his rubbish, but wherever rubbish may have come from, in order to leave it in good order. That's got to tell you something about whether this is someone you'd be happy to see operating licensed premises in Penarth. And I'd invite you to grant the application, less the off sales element on midnight, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Happy to answer any questions, of course, but that's us.
Just one question from me, Mr. Phipps. Just for clarity, you're amending your application to drop the off sales after 11 o'clock, or are you inviting us to make a decision on that?
Well, 6 and 1 and half a dozen of the other, if I'm honest with you, Chair. Well, look, let's make it easy. We drop that. Okay. We're not proposing to proceed with the off sales. I suppose I've got to say this, if you allow me this slightly sort of cheeky observation. My client would say, were he sitting next to me, that it would be perfectly proper for you to grant it because he believes that the premises is a good premises doing a good job. But I can't talk to him, as you can see. We can see each other, but we can't speak. I think I'll hopefully not irritate him too much by saying, let's drop that part and let's accommodate the residents in that way.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Phipps. Have Councillor Nugent-Finn's just disappeared, but I was just going to ask Councillor Drake and Councillor Nugent-Finn, have you any questions for clarification before we go into closed session?
Sorry, John, I was just in the chat room. Just sent you a question just to sort of pull everything together. If you want to have a look at that.
I'm looking at your question there, Rachel. I don't think there's any need for that. The applicants have withdrawn that part of the application, so I think that's clear.
Okay, I obviously just coming from the clarity point of view, Chair, but yes, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Anything else, or any question from Pam? No. Can I just hand over to Mark for a moment then, so he can explain what's going to happen next?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Basically, I'll invite the interested parties, applicant, and obviously applicant's legal representative and licensing officers to hang up from the meeting now while the committee have their private deliberations. What I'll do, once deliberations are complete, I will ring you all back and let you know when you're able to join. Does everyone understand?
We're all happy with that? Okay, yeah. Thank you very much for your attendance so far, and we look forward to seeing you again shortly.
And
thank you.
Just add a quick note, basically it'll be joining the same meeting, it'll be the same link, but I'll confirm that when I ring you. Okay, thank you.
This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, is everybody happy if I continue? Yep, you all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, but thank you very much for your patience. And I'll now go through our deliberations. On the 3rd of July 2020, a subcommittee of the Vale of Glamorgan Council Licensing Committee met, consisting of Councillor John Thomas, Councillor Pam Drake, and Councillor Rachel Nugent-Finn. The subcommittee considered an application by Penn Trading Limited for the grant of a premises licence, Beach Cliff Traditional Fish and Chips, the Esplanade Penarth, CF 643AS. The application sought the sale of alcohol and late night refreshment. The hours requested in respect of the aforementioned licensable activities are sale of alcohol 10 to 2300 Sunday to Wednesday, 10 till midnight Thursday, Friday and Saturday. No off sales of alcohol past 11 p.m. And late night refreshment 2300 to midnight Thursday, Friday and Saturday. The hearing was attended by Mr. Matthew Phipps, solicitor representing the applicants. Mr. Philip Ryan, the proposed DPS, was also present. The responsible authorities, there were no responsible authorities in attendance. However, the licensing officer confirmed the application had been properly served to the relevant authorities. Other persons present in attendance were Mr. David Hughes and Mr. Philip Brown, local residents. The evidence presented by the parties can be summarised as follows. The applicant, Mr. Matthew Phipps, solicitor for the applicant, stated the written representations of the applicant were expanded upon and were distributed thereafter for all to consider. The other persons, Mr. Brown accompanied by Mr. Hughes, who confirmed that they were socially distancing and compliant with current restrictions in accordance with COVID-19, and representing other persons who were all residents living in the vicinity of the premises. And they stated that no questions were asked of the representatives of the applicant by the interested parties. The order of the representations and by whom they were made were outlined to the meeting by Yvonne Witchell. Further representations were read out, which covered the fact that the premises were in a conservation area and would have a significant impact on residents and visitors. The representation related to matters that concern planning related issues. No fish and chip premises in the rest of the town sell alcohol, in reference to ongoing complaints about odour nuisance. The second representation dealt with the timings and the fact that the area was residential, including noise from cars, frontage being open, and odour was an issue, and the collection of waste, which was at 5:30 a.m. and a recurring issue. An increase in antisocial behaviour was referenced with no specific issues detailed. The third reference related to CCTV and its direction. Public nuisance was referenced by non-compliance, but this was not developed further. Again, reference was made to no other fish and chip shop selling alcohol, and all closed at 10:30 p.m. Other premises and times of closing were detailed. Mr. Phipps asked whether there could be a breach when no license exists. It was accepted that this could not be the position. The licensing officer detailed licensable activities of other premises, confirming that they may not be operating to those times. Mr. Hughes reiterated that he considered the application unacceptable. It was confirmed that elected members for the area had no issues with the application as far as they were aware. In summing up, Mr. Hughes stated that the residents were still opposed to the licence being granted, especially beyond 11 p.m. Summing up, Mr. Phipps submitted, the proportion of residents in the block who made representations was low proportionally. Numerous emails had been sent out. Elected members had no concerns. Other premises are irrelevant to the current application, and it was wrong to say neighbouring premises were not operating until later hours. The application is as set out in Appendix A, albeit the applicants dropped the request for off sales after 11 p.m. at the meeting. There appeared to be no objection to the 11 p.m. hour. Concern about people drinking after 11 p.m. on the Esplanade is not being pursued, as off sales beyond 11 p.m. no longer part of the application. On sales after 11 p.m. do not appear to be an objection. Written representations of all parties have been taken into account, including representations from the applicant presented by Mr. Matthew Phipps, and representations from Miss Gwen Thomas, Lady Elizabeth Stokes, Mr. and Mrs. Wyatt, Miss Anne Evans, and Mr. and Mrs. Dorrell. The licensing subcommittee has resolved to grant the application as amended, that is with the withdrawal of off sales post 11 p.m. The license will be subject to the conditions offered by the applicant. The reasons for the decision: members of the subcommittee were satisfied that the application would not cause unnecessary problems for local residents. The fact that the premises had operated with 10s with no complaints emphasises this. Also, the conditions offered by the applicants gave protection to the local residents, which would not be available if the license was refused, but the premises continue to run as at present. Those are such as noise and odour. And the applicants are aware that when granted, this license can be reviewed at any time should the operation not be supporting the licensing objectives. In reaching our decision today, the subcommittee has considered the application in detail along with all written and oral submissions. We have taken into account the Licensing Act 2003 as amended, in particular the licensing objectives and the Home Office guidance along with the Council's statement of licensing policy. Any party has a right of appeal against the decision of this committee. The appeal must be made in writing and within 21 days to the Cardiff and Vale of Glamorgan Magistrates Court. Should you be in any doubt as to your legal rights and/or responsibilities, you should take independent legal advice. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you all for attending the meeting. As I say, it was the first remote meeting that we've held, and I personally think that it went quite well. A couple of little hiccups which we ironed out. So thank you all very much for your attendance and taking part in the meeting today.
Thank you.
And just to say the same from me and obviously from Mr. Ryan, but I do a lot of licensing hearings. This went very well, take it from me. I mean, I appreciate we had the decision, but I don't mean that. I mean, the conduct of it was super, and thank you to Mark and to Mr. Price for all of that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Phipps. Mr. Brown? Sorry, Mr. Hughes. Sorry, you got Mr. Brown's name, Mr. Hughes's face. Mr. Hughes. Did you wish to speak? No. Okay, Mark, I think we're all done. Everyone's free to.
Okay. Mr. Hughes didn't want to speak then, Chair. Did he? I don't think. No. No, I think that's fine. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. Well, if you're happy to go, we can leave now, Chair. And everyone.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Good luck. Good luck with the business, and I hope that the residents have no concerns going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.